Welcome back, everybody. Hope you are doing well and having a wonderful day. Um, still got this. I still have this concept of right and wrong on my mind. Uh, Thinking about what is truth. What is truth? And truth is not an easy. It's not an easy word to define. I don't think. I think that we have an idea of what truth is, um, but do we really know what truth is? Examples. Take World War II. When I was a kid, growing up in the 80s and 90s, World War II history was really simple. Okay? The Japanese came, bombed Pearl Harbor, instigating us to join in World War II. Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, is essentially taking over the world, killing off innocent people, taking over land. Germany's defeated. The United States drops the atomic bombs on Japan. Japan surrenders. USA wins World War II. Is what I was taught as a kid. Now, obviously, this being 2020, and you've got the excuse me, you've got the History Channel. You get to learn all that filler information. But did you ever wonder what World War II history they teach in Japan? What World War II they teach in Russia? And what World War II they teach in Germany? And what World War II they teach in Great Britain? How their versions of history, for them, that is their truth. Our version is our truth. So what side of truth do you land on? I suppose it depends on where you were brought up, what part of the world you were brought up in, whether you chose to just hear one side of the story or you chose to look into other parts of the story. What is right and wrong? What is truth? I think it's all about perspective. Like, don't you think that perspective plays a vital role in your day-to-day life? You have your perspective. So take me for example. I have my perspective. So when I see something happen, here's my perspective. Okay? But perspective changes the truth, because my truth and your truth could be different, even though we experience the same thing. Okay? And I want to try, much like I did with World War II and truth, I want to break perspective down to smaller levels so that we understand where this is going. So let's take 9/11, September 11th, 2001, which I saw on television much like a lot of the nation, a lot of the world. So how do I break down the perspective? Okay, so we do it like this. The perspective that I had during 9/11 from Connellsville, Pennsylvania, watching it on television, was different than the perspective of the cameraman and the news anchor who were filming what was going on and talking about it at the same time. Their perspective was different than the people who were in Manhattan while it was happening, staring up at the Twin Towers on fire, whose perspective was different from the people working in the World Trade Center when the planes hit the building, whose perspective was different from the firefighters that were coming to the scene and rushing into the building, whose perspective was different from the police who were trying to organize outside amidst the chaos, whose perspective was different than the ambulance and the doctors and the people who were taking care of them, whose perspective was different by the families that were also watching this all unfold. That's how perspective works. We can all experience the exact same thing at the exact same time, but our perspective changes how we interpret it. So, where am I going with that? So let's combine now truth and perspective. Is truth based on perspective? Or is truth based on perspectives coming together, sharing their sides, and coming to an agreement that this is what happened? It happens every day. You see it in Walmart, you see it in bars. Perspective changes everything. So if you're out on a date and you're at the bar and you go to the restroom and you come back and your date is with an opposite gender in what seems like a moment of romance to you, your perspective, you go over and you've got two other perspectives there, but then you fight the person who was that you perceived as being romantically involved with your significant other in your absence. Perspective changed truth, because your truth was so-and-so's hitting on my significant other. Their perspective was, what the hell are you doing? This was completely innocent. I'm all about finding the simplest ways to explain things, because the way that I think is very complicated. But if I can break it down, I think it helps people follow my train of thought, which is sometimes like a freight train that's going downhill and has no brakes, and that's just how it goes. So, perspective and truth. So, when you look at topics such as racism, you look at politics, you look at sexual orientation and gender issues, where there are people who are genuinely ignorant as defined by the dictionary, which is not understanding. So they ask ignorant questions, and the people who who ask the ignorant questions, who are trying to understand, get categorized as ignorant in the incorrect definition of the term, and are looked at like a piece of shit because how dare you ask me this question? How am I supposed to understand you if I don't ask questions? Like, how is that possible? I don't have any idea what it's like to be a woman. So if I wanted to know or needed to know, would I not invest my time in talking to women to better understand? I'm not black. So why would it be wrong to talk about what I don't understand so that we can be on the same page? Somehow along the line we got taught that that's wrong, that we don't talk about stuff. So then we formulate our own truths, and when we create things such as racism, and I'm not saying that racism isn't a real thing. Don't hear that at all, because I will stand up for everybody and anybody and tell you that racism does in fact exist, that it is a real thing. I'm just explaining how we could get there when we don't talk to each other. So I got my version of the truth, and you've got your version of the truth, and then there's just this gap in the middle. Like, why can't we just start bridging this gap? Why is the gap got to keep getting bigger? But piling more shit in it. That doesn't help. It's not helping any of us. So then what happens is somebody who does the right thing stands alone, sadly. Because to them they're doing the right thing, but then to others they're not doing the right thing. It truly doesn't work both ways. You can't put, God, I wish I had one of those baby toys. You can't put a square peg into a round hole. Like, without busting up the square. I mean, like, I'm not a physicist, but it defies physics to even attempt to do such a thing. So why do we have to have all this separation when the answers, I guess I should use that in a plural sense, are amongst all of us, but people want to keep us divided so we don't bring it together. So my perspective and your perspective remain our own individual perspectives. Remains our own individual truth. I mean, go back. Oh, okay. I mean, you can, and this is something that you can take all the way back. So, okay, I'm not religious, all right, but I went to Catholic school for 8 years. Okay, so I've paid attention. I've learned a little bit about the Bible. Perspective. Take Jesus Christ. Let's take Jesus Christ into perspective. So Jesus had his perspective. Caiaphas, who was the high priest in Jerusalem, had his perspective. And then you got, who was it? Pontius Pilate over here in Rome, well, representing Rome in Jerusalem, with Roman perspective. We all know how the story went, so I'm not going to go into great detail about the story. But who was right? I guess it depends on which religion you look at. We have, if there was just one, then we wouldn't, there wouldn't be no, there wouldn't be any need for discussion, because there would be one religion, and there would be one of this, and there would be one of that, and we don't live in that world. I mean, I'm pretty sure that right here in the hometown that I live in, I'm like 99% sure that we have like 13 churches, 13 or 14 churches in my town. And I bet you 10 of them are different denominations. So who's right? I don't know. I don't know who's right. I got my perspective because I like to learn as much as I can. So I talk to people of different faiths, of different belief systems, people who believe in science, and people who believe in religion, and people who don't believe in either. And it helps me understand what somebody else is thinking, but it also helps me gain perspective, because you explain something to me in one way, now I look at something differently, my perspective has changed. You know, I know that it sounds crazy, and the reason that it probably sounds crazy is because it's a very simple thing that sits right in front of our faces every single day of our lives, and somehow or another we're just oblivious to it. But truth and perspective, they go hand in hand. Perspective changes the way you look at everything. You know, I think about documentaries that I've watched about serial killers, because Netflix is wonderful. I wish they were paying me for me to say Netflix on my channel. Anyway, you know, you hear from people who were friends with these serial killers and their perspective. Oh my God, this was the most amazing person. And then you see in the news that they murdered all these people. It's like, oh, boom, perspective change. It's how fast it can happen. Perspective changes every time you go outside. Sometimes the sky is blue, and sometimes the clouds are gray, and sometimes it's raining, and sometimes it's snowing, and sometimes it's so bright outside that you feel like you need like 3 pairs of sunglasses. Your perspective changes all the time. So if I can't talk to you about our differences, I'm stuck in neutral. I'm stuck in a ditch, because I'm never going to get out of this ditch if I can't have a conversation. But I don't know. I just don't. It makes me sad, because there are a lot of good people out in the world. And we come from all different backgrounds, all different colors, all shapes and sizes, and people get overlooked all the time. And sadly, it probably will happen. It's been happening since the beginning, and it will probably be happening all the way up to the end. And That's another thing that you get from people's perspectives is, well, we've already tried that. Or you are not going to make a difference. One person cannot change the world. That's what people like to say. And I think that you underestimate people when you tell them that they can't do something. Because people can do anything. We can solve the problems if we communicate with each other. We can find solutions together. We're not going to find solutions separate. And our solutions are not going to come from the governmental system that we currently have in place in the United States of America. And I'm not even going to get into that in this video. But I will tell you, just look at the last 20 years of American politics. And yes, there have been some small changes that have taken place. But much like a different time in this country where it was white people can't go here and black people can't go there, and if one was in the room and then it just created awkwardness. Like, look at our politics. I mean, like, seriously, if there's a Republican president and a Democratic Congress, Senate, whatever, what's getting done? Nothing. If there's a Democratic president and a Republican Congress, what's getting done? Nothing. Just a lot of bickering and bullshit back and forth. And who suffers for it? We do. We suffer for it. Because then that adds to our divisions, because now we do this, you're a Democrat when you're a Republican. All right? And now apparently we live in a world where people can't be friends if they voted Republican or they voted Democrat. Like, I wish that I had another notebook paper so I could rip open another division. But perspective. How can I understand? How can a Republican understand a Democrat if they don't talk to each other? It doesn't work that way. If you don't share your perspectives and help come up with a solution together, nothing gets done but more division. Don't you think that we're divided enough? Don't you think that we have enough perspectives? Don't you think we have enough truths? I mean, Abraham in the Bible said when he said that God told him to go to this new land and he was going to have all these descendants, and Abraham's thought to himself was, how can I lead a people when I can't even lead my own family? He couldn't even keep his own family together. And his perspective, was what do I do? Now they say one person can't change anything, but according to Christians and according to the Catholic religion, especially the way I grew up, one man did make a difference. How many people listened? Probably not a lot. I suppose in retrospect, he's probably lucky that he didn't get stoned for saying that God spoke to him. I don't know. It was a different time. My mind can't comprehend a time like that. But if you think about it, this is 2020, and a lot of those things are repeating. Not the exact same way. But history repeats itself constantly when we choose to ignore it. We have to stop choosing to ignore the problems that are going on in the world and just maintaining one perspective. There are many fundamental truths about life, but one big one is that there's more to the story. It's not just, it's not black and white. Like it's or black or white. Like there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of blue. There's a lot of purple. There's a lot of red. There's a lot of all the colors of the rainbow. And if all those colors don't come together to make the rainbow, they disappear. Because individually they don't shine the way that a rainbow does. But a rainbow is a good representation of what happens when you bring perspectives together. You can create something beautiful. I don't want to live in a world that is black or white. Because A, it's black and white and gray and blue and red and purple and pink and orange and yellow. It's not either or. But we get a perspective and a mindset that something is one way. And one example that I did see about perspective and truth that I did really like was what plus what equals 9? Okay? 6 plus 3 equals 9, right? 5 plus 4 equals 9, right? 7 plus 2 equals 9. 8 plus 1 equals 9. What was the right way to get to 9? Is there a right way to get to 9? But I can change it and I can say what times what equals 9. What divided by what equals 9. What minus what equals 9. You can add layer and layer and layer and layer and layer and layer and layer on top of it. Which way is the right way? I don't know. I guess it's all about perspective. Because if I'm sitting in my chair in math class as a child, and I say 6 plus 3 is 9, and the kid sitting next to me, his brain says, 8 plus 1 equals 9. Are we both going to get an A, or one of us going to get a lower grade? So the person who answers that is the teacher. So now you have another perspective. But the perspective of how to get 9, everybody's right. So how can there just be one when there's so many different ways to get there? It's interesting. I'm very interested to hear any kind of comment, good or bad. Hit me up. I'd love to hear it. Love to discuss it. Like to get a volunteer for one of these videos to sit with me and maybe debate with me. Let's talk. Let's show the world that we can have a discussion about our perspectives and see if we can come up with a solution. Anybody want to accept the challenge? Insert question mark here. Anyway, I wish you all peace and love. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And regardless of where you are, regardless of any of our differences, peace and love as always.